Hello everyone. This video is going to be about episodic ataxia. I wanted to make this video because, episodic ataxia is a very misunderstood form of ataxia that I have. And I've always been frustrated because of this. Because my experience has been totally different from it's just been like, because the ataxia, the name episodic ataxia occurs in episodes, for instance, people don't see it as being a chronic condition or being that bad. Or they see it as a less severe condition than a persistent and permanent condition. However, with the name episodic ataxia, it can come eventually with permanent cerebellar deficits, regardless if you're having an episode or not. So people often think, well, the name is episodic ataxia, so that's the only thing you experience is episodes of ataxia. This is not true. With episodic ataxia, you can develop permanent cerebellar atrophy, which in the cerebellum part of the brain, the back of the brain, is known for to control motor balance, coordination, things like that. So it often develops in people with episodic ataxia. With that being said, they can develop permanent ataxia and not just having episodes. So, yeah. The term episodes, like episodic ataxia, it's kind of like, it's misleading because it doesn't describe all the symptoms of episodic ataxia, especially in type 2, because you can't just judge it based on its name. Episodes is like the non-progressive episodic symptoms that come along with episodic ataxia. However, there are permanent symptoms that also come with episodic ataxia, especially in type 2. And so it can actually look more like SCA to some extent, spinocerebellar ataxia, as a person develops this permanent cerebellar atrophy that causes more issues in between these so-called episodes. So in episodic ataxia type 2, episodic ataxia, or the gene CACNA1A, there's often overlap in the symptoms or clinical features, they say, with SCA6, which means, EA2 can basically look like SCA6 to some extent. So, also hemiplegic migraine 1 comes along with the gene. And many individuals with EA2 experience paralysis on one side of the body and migraine headaches, just like hemiplegic migraine 1. So it's more of a complex disorder. It can't be looked at in one way. So, with that being said, in this video, I'd like to discuss the different things in regards to episodic ataxia type 2, like that one thing I just talked about, because the name can be, kind of misleading. Another thing I wanted to talk about is is episodic ataxia type 2, a serious condition? And I wanted to touch touch base on this in this particular video and share my experience with it. People with episodic ataxia type 2, during these vertigo episodes, you often get this cognitive dysfunction or brain fog. So in my experience, people tend to, let's say you're affected by EA2, people tend to not be able to think straight because the vertigo is so debilitating. And they can't, like, let's say you have to do something and you're like, well, I don't know, what to do. Kind of like you tend to not think straight during one of those vertigo episodes because it's so debilitating. Another thing, these vertigo episodes have severely incapacitated people, particularly even myself. When you have these episodes, they can be very serious and can have serious consequences. So you kind of have to, like, think, they're kind of like having seizures. Let's say if you're driving in particular and you suddenly have a vertigo episode from your episodic ataxia. This isn't good to have because it can lead to serious consequences like a serious car accident. I've been with someone in my family that was in the middle of an episodic ataxia attack and was driving, and I was the passenger. And it didn't end well. So I kind of know, based on my experience with it and having other family members that have it. So, um, yeah. So that can be a serious thing in having episodic ataxia type 2. Other serious things with having episodic ataxia type 2 is that it can come along with epilepsy. So like I mentioned before with the driving, not just with the vertigo episodes, but with the epilepsy. The similar thing, and technically you're not supposed to drive unless you have epilepsy under control. Or whatever. Many people with epilepsy are not allowed to drive. And they have seizures. Seizures are potentially very serious happenings, and they can occur in people with episodic ataxia type 2. There has been very serious seizure disorders that came along with individuals that have episodic ataxia as well. And some of these seizures disorders can lead to hospital stays and things like that. And while it's said that, episodic ataxia is not said to, let's say, shorten life expectancy per se, it could come with other very serious consequences. Those with CA-CNA disorders that have hemiplegic migraine tend to be at risk for, let's say, fatal edema, where the brain tends to swell, and it can lead to a coma and death. So this is often brought out by trivial head trauma or mild head trauma and can be a life-threatening condition as well. Some CA-CNA disorders tend to cause life-threatening conditions, such as serious epilepsies and hemiplegic migraine episodes and things like that. And a lot of the time there's also overlapping in the symptoms with the CACNA1A disorders, and people with the disorder can, display many different symptoms, not just one, let's say episodic ataxia, but some of them can display more than one feature of having a CACNA1A disorder. With that being said, epilepsy and have an episodic ataxia type 2, or have an episodic ataxia type 2 and have an, um, developmental disability as well. Which leads to another thing. I wanted to touch base on developmental disability as well. In these disorders associated with the gene CACNA1A, they tend to range, yes, mild to severe. So it's kind of like a spectrum thing. But I wanted to touch base on the severe aspects of having, the developmental disabilities and intellectual disability or whatever. People with these disabilities, even though it's developmental, let's say the person fails to reach their developmental milestones or has an intellectual disability or an autism spectrum disability, in severe cases, these really tend to hinder lives of these individuals. And it's not just, because it's a developmental disability. It can be physical as well. Like physically being able to, let's say, take care of yourself independently and things like that. Failure to comprehend, how to do certain tasks. And you need constant attention or assistance in performing different tasks if you have this disability as well. So even though it's technically not a physical disability, like ataxia is very physical, you're imbalanced, whatever. This disability can pretty much hinder lives of individuals too. So it's not, physical disabilities are not like the only disability that you need help doing certain tasks and you can't do things independently. So I wanted to touch base on that as well. With that being said, people with developmental disabilities, often based on my experience, because I have a developmental disability, episodic ataxia, type 2, I've had a possible seizure in the past 1 year ago. I have frequent myoclonic jerks, which are said to be like seizures, but I don't lose consciousness during them. I'm aware of them happening. I have intellectual disability. I've had a past diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, high functioning, developmental delays. So I had a lot of things possibly going on as having a CACNA1A disorder. I've had behavioral issues. Now, these are severe behavioral issues and emotional regulation issues. So I have been hospitalized due to having emotional issues and behavioral issues. Also, a side effect can be depression, anxiety, of course, because you're dealing with a chronic illness. And you're not getting better. I've had to struggle with that severely as well. And I've had to deal with a lot with having CACNA1A disorder and episodic ataxia. I'm not just dealing with, a non-fatal ataxia. Episodic ataxia type 2 is not said to be life-shortening, like I had mentioned, but it can come with these other potentially serious effects that can potentially be life-threatening. Depression, severe depression can lead to suicidal thoughts and attempts if you're not being treated correctly for the disorder or conditions. And having severe behavioral and emotional issues. People with developmental issues can have severe trouble, let's say, coping with stressful situations, in which I have, and things like that. I've been in and out of being hospitalized multiple times due to these issues, and it wasn't fun. And the thing is that my disorder is so rare, people don't understand the linkage between, let's say, my cerebellum atrophy or my episodic ataxia and related to these other things that I got. So it's kind of like, it's very frustrating because, I've had to deal with very bad side effects due to my condition, and people don't know much about my condition, you know. And I see different specialists for these different side effects of my condition. It's not like, you know, I see a psychiatrist and, they don't know much about episodic ataxia because that's not what they specialize in. So it's something else. But anyways, I wanted to make this video and share that. I hope you all have a good day, and I hope you found this insightful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.